Hello everyone, this is Jody from Method Grid. Welcome to our latest webinar case study. Glad you could join us. I'm very lucky today to be joined by Kayleigh Lowes, who's the interviewing team manager at Acritas. And in this webinar, we're going to talk to Kayleigh about how her team use Method Grid as part of their HR new staff induction process. Then I'm going to take over and do a bit of a demo of the grid management features we have available in Method Grid. And finally, we'll answer any questions you might have after the interview and the demo. Before we get started, give you a quick overview of this webinar interface. On the right of your screen, you should have a questions tab. So as we're talking or as we're demoing, if you have any questions that you think of, just type them in there and they'll queue up. And at the end of the webinar, we'll go through all of those. Okay. So welcome, Kayleigh. Thanks very much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Can I kick things off by asking you to tell us a bit about Acritas as a business and what you do there?
Yeah, of course. So we are a legal market research company. We primarily specialise in, like I say, in the legal market. So in short, we do research on behalf of law firms by speaking to their clients across the world about topics relating to the legal market or more specific topics that they want us to explore. Then we analyse, present the findings back to the law firms to try and help them improve their market position, just as well as the services that they offer to the clients as well. So like I say, in short, it is just very legal focused market research, and we do a little bit of property research as well.
Okay, that's great. And what's your role there at Acritas?
So I manage the interviewing team. So I'm responsible for recruiting, training, and performance management of the specialist researchers we have. And they do all of the interviews with the law firm clients. So we have about 20 or so people in my team in particular. And, you know, we do a lot of recruitment, a lot of the induction training and things like that as well, yeah. Okay,
that's great. And you sort of came across Method Grid. And how would you say that Method Grid has helped you and your department specifically? What kind of business pain points were you hoping to address?
So before we actually used Method Grid, all of our team resources, useful information was all saved on our server. So it could get very confusing to find exactly what you were looking for. Just with a lot of the same documents being related to different topics. So we'd have duplicate documents saved in all different folders, labelled in an attempt to try and structure it. But then myself and my support team would still get requests from the team just for particular documents, just purely out of people not knowing where they were saved or not knowing that they even existed in the first place. So in terms of having Method Grid now, we managed to get all of the resources in a more structured layout and all of the useful documents saved in one place. And from my perspective, it's just been so simple to use. And I've been able to structure it in terms of the folders and the grid titles, as well as the different themes, elements, etc. So not only just save the documents for them to refer to, but also write them up in a way that, you know, using the features that it has. So in the text boxes, being able to put in like demo videos, a lot of things like that. So even just in a day-to-day for the team to refer to, it's just been very easy for them to find useful documents and information.
Okay, that's great. I'm gonna you kindly let me have access to your account for the purposes of the webinar. So I'm gonna dive into your folder here where you've got your induction and resources folder with your various grids in there for inductions and resources. I'm going to go into the Welcome to Acritas one, which I think is one of your starting induction grids. So if you could just give us a quick overview of this grid, and I'll scroll up and down. If you wanted me to go into any of these elements as you're talking, just let me know. Yeah, just take us through how this grid kind of works as a new starter.
Yeah, so the page that you're on with the layout of the different grids, that's actually the day-to-day. So for each of those grids, that's what we would intend to do on each of the training days. So it usually takes around about 5 days for us to complete the induction process.
Yeah.
So the Welcome to Acritas is actually the first day. So it's intended to be quite a laid-back day, just completing all the admin tasks, so filling in the paperwork, reading the policies, and things like that. So we wanted it to be very, like I say, very relaxed and just isn't intended to be, you know, welcome to Acritas. Here's all the company information, here's all the information on your role. In the team section, that's actually bios of the team, so you could, you know, read a little bit about everybody, just, you know, so they can kind of get to know people before meeting them properly. So in the blue, that's all of the reading materials. So As the trainer, you would go through the each kind of element and, not necessarily read it out, but just talk a little bit about each topic. So this one in particular, an overview of what the company does. There's a link to our website there, which takes you to bios of other departments. And then we have a message from the CEO as well, which is a video recording and, just thanking the team and saying how important the team are to the company and things like that. And so we go down each section. So the blue we will read out and go straight down. And then in the light green, the task section. So that's all of the tasks that the new starters would need to complete by the end of the day. So we have a link there to just a little quiz just to see if they've, where they can refer back to other information and fill that in. A little bit about the payroll information, so different forms that they need to fill out. So just different things that would need them to complete. And then we have a little get to know me bio box where they can fill that in, and then that would obviously get transferred into the right team section in the bios. And then at the end, it's all of the GDPR, reading through all the HR policies, and then we do like a desk assessment to make sure that they've got all the equipment that they need as well. And then at the bottom is just like it says, just extra reading and resources. So there's a little bit about the legal market there, a little presentation on legal terminology, because not everybody that we employ has actually got a legal background. Mm-hmm. So it is just extra reading material if that was something they wanted to, just read in their own time.
Okay, that's great. And kind of, I can see you work through these new inductions. Do you use Method Grid to sort of manage information for the team as they're doing their day-to-day work as well?
Yeah, so we are currently in the process. We did have another grid which was just purely resources, but we found that if we're getting new starters in and using this grid in particular, we wanted it to be just the place that we've walked through with them. So we're in the process of moving the resources onto just this grid, and because it's all laid out in a specific format, so the systems is one grid. Any pitching documents that they want to have a look at, that's all in the one grid. So that's how we've kind of done it. So the team can just kind of click in the grid that, of an area that they're wanting to find resources for, and that's all in there. And
that's all kept in those. That's great. Okay, thanks, Kayleigh. Okay, now I'm going to jump into our demo account, and Kayleigh's mentioned they're organizing the grids and how they do that. And I'm going to demo the main ways we have of organizing grids within Method Grid. So I'll just quickly switch to our demo account. So in here, we've got the main grid library. This is where all your grids will live. We've just released a new feature, actually, access control. So on free and pro plans, everyone has a My Grids folder, and this is private to you. You can create grids in here as a user or a builder or an architect. Get it the way you want it, and then move it into your account's main grid library when you want people to have access. So that's a new feature. And on the pro plan, we have full access control on the folders and the grid. So you can decide the members of your account who are going to have access to those grids or folders. So like I say, there's two ways of organizing grids in Method Grid. We've got a simple folder library down the left here, primary grid library, and then subfolders which you can create. You can close this and open it. Okay, and in these you can create subfolders as deep as you want to go. It essentially just works almost exactly the same as your file explorer on your PC or Mac. So that provides a kind of categorization of your grids into simple folders. And we also have a grid labeling system. So this is all configurable. You can edit these to whatever you want. We've set up a little demo one here. You get a set of colors and you can assign these to the grids over here. So I can make this one a red master grid, for instance, and it will change its color. Now, the difference between the labels and the folders is labels is kind of like a hierarchy as you would normally have a folder structure, whereas the labels are account-wide. So I'll show you in a minute how you can filter grids, but the main point is you can label, say, a load of grids as your master grids, and then using this filter system, you don't have to be in the folder to see them. You can filter across the whole account, and then any grids you've got access to, you'll get results for that. So staying on a kind of staff induction theme, that's where we started, I'll create a quick folder so you how that works. If I go into my grid library, as long as I've got edit access, or I'm a builder or an architect, I can create new folders here. So if I create a new folder, you'll see it's just put it down the bottom there for me. I've got a new folder here ready to receive any grids that I want into. If I go into edit mode, I can rename it. So maybe this is going to be my staff inductions folder where I'm going to keep them all. That's now ready to receive grids. If I want to make a subfolder in here, I just go into the folder. Again, click on new folder. Because I'm in that folder, it's going to make it underneath new child folder for me. And again, I can edit these. So perhaps this is going to be my induction templates. And then perhaps I'm going to have another folder for this, to create a folder for each staff induction that I do, for instance. So this might just be the straight inductions folder. And you can see I can pretty quickly build up a way of organizing all my grids across there. So as soon as I've got my folder structure in there, when I create it, I'm on the pro plan here. I can see who's got access to this. So because I created it here and I'm an architect, at the moment only I and any fellow super user architects have access to it. But it could be that I've got 2 HR member of staff maybe who I want to be able to edit everything in here. So I can just go ahead and search all my members on this platform. And perhaps Emma and Harry are my 2 people who work in HR, and I want to give them edit access to everything in this folder. I can just give them there. It tells me they've given view as default, so they'll be able to view everything. But I can change that and set that to edit, and they'll both be able to edit things that I make in here now. Okay, I'm going to put an example staff induction in there so you could see how the grids work. Everyone has access to our grid examples here in our grid store. If I go there, I've got an example of a 12-week induction. I can clone that example from here into my grid library, including all the elements within it. So that were away. So anyone can do this on the platform now, users, builders, or architects. And when it does it, it's going to put it into my grids folder. So it puts it into your own personal folder here. So until I move that out of there, only I've got access to it, and I can do whatever I like to it. So perhaps this is my new template. So if I put that into edit mode, if I want to move that into the main grid library, I just drag it across, just like kind of you would on your desktop, into staff inductions. I'll put it in my induction templates. So now if I go in here, here's my grid, my induction template ready to go. I can edit that to whatever I want. My HR people have access to it because anything new in there, they're going to get access to automatically. Okay, if I had perhaps a new starter now, and I want to clone this grid so they can run through it in their own instance of it, I might even want to create them their own folder. Say I've got several grids that I want them to run through. I can go into this inductions folder and I can create another new folder. So perhaps this is going to be, I'm going to name, this is just one way you could do it, but I could name this the person. So perhaps it's got a person in here called Susie Greer, inductions. Okay, I can go up to my templates and I can go ahead and clone that template with all the elements as a new instance ready for Susie to run through. If I let that whir away, she'll run through it. Okay, it's created that there. It's still in my induction templates as a clone, but I can now drag that into Susie's folder, and perhaps I have a couple of those. You know, I can drag all the ones she needs in there. And at the moment, and as soon as I'm ready in here, let's edit this into Susie's one. Change the name. I mean, I could bespoke the content to Susie as well if I wanted to. Yeah, so that's Susie's induction grid ready to go. It's got a couple of it's got a checklist in here as an example, so a task that you might want people to tick off as they've done things. And I want to give Susie access to these grids. I can just go back to the folder level, open up my access control, and now I can add Susie as long as it's on the platform. Susie's got view access to this now, and she'll be able to see any grids that go in here. So she can now go in and progress through here and tick things off as they're done. Element completed. There we go. And then if she had multiple grids in here, I can view an overview of the progress in here in our checklist task items overview. Okay, I'll give you another example of that actually, because I've got another folder in here with some more staff inductions in. So say this was full of everyone's staff induction with various tasks and checklists on here. You've got an overview here where you can see the progress in each one. Okay, so that's folders and grids and how you could organize that. I mean, you can see you could have one for each person. You could just as easily just have them all in here as individual grids with their names and work on the access control and just give the new staff people who need access in there. The labeling, so for instance, say this is my master grid. See, I've got a master grid color label here. I can assign that to this, so I can say it's master grid and it's also HR. I can give it a dot or a full. So a full, it's going to go completely red, and a dot, it'll just have a little yellow dot. There we go. So that's now labeled as that. And then let's say, for instance, I'm going to label all these inductions as being HR, just so I can come back and find them at some point. So it's an HR process. If I was then in the grid library and I wanted to see everything we've got with various filters on them. So if I want to see HR master grids, for instance, I can click on this filter here and I can tick, well, I want it to be a master grid and I want it to be HR. And there's none in this folder, but I'd like to look across all folders. And I can use an or and. So or would be, if I do that one, this is everything that's either labeled red or yellow. But then I can easily just filter down more and use the and. So it's got to be a master grid and from the HR department. And you'll see that filters down like that. And that's all completely configurable. So you can set these up however you want them. So the big sort of difference between the labels is they're account-wide throughout all the folders. And your folders, you can set up however you would like a normal sort of file explorer. Okay, I hope that gives you a nice introduction to the two main ways to organize your grids in there. I'm going to go back to our questions now, see where we are. So if you do have any questions, pop them in the questions tab there. I can see I've got one here. So, is it possible to send an automatic notification every time a grid or new element is added into an existing grid? Yes, it is. In fact, I'll show you. Let me come out of this. So, for instance, in this folder here, when you go into your notifications, see the little bell up here, this is where system notifications will appear. In notification settings, you can see the various things that I can turn on and off that I want to get notifications for. So you've got when a new grid is added. So I think it was new grid and new element. And we've got new grid is added, a new element is added to a grid. So to use my staff induction person as an example, for instance, say Susie's got access to this. So if I was to add a new grid here now, then the people here who have access, they're going to get a new notification of that grid as soon as I change the name. So if that was Induction 2 or something for Susie, as soon as I do that and get it ready, you could have cloned in the whole complete one. Susie will get a notification for that in the system and also an email as long as it's ticked and configured to do that. And the same thing would happen if I added a new element. That would trigger a notification as well. So I hope that answers your question there. Can you go back through the progress feature, show how much someone has done in their grid? Yes. Okay. Let's go back into Sue. So we've got 2 in here now. So if I add some more checklist items in here, I think that's probably what we want to see. So I'm not going to make these. They won't make a lot of sense, but we'll just put some in. So if this was 2 tasks maybe they have to do in this element, so blah and blah. Okay, in the grid itself, you can see the elements that have tasks or checklists in them with this progress bar at the top. And you can also, whenever you're in a grid, you can click this info here and it will show you the number of elements that have checklists. So there's 2, so 1 of 2 is completed because this one's had them all ticked off. And then the total number there actually ticked off. And then at the folder level, it gives me an overview. It looks into every grid that has checklists in. So let me put an element and a checklist in here so you can see that. So this is something to do. I can put in a checklist here. Do my checklist. So now I've got checklist in this grid as well. And you can see I've got a progress bar here to show how far we've gone through. And then if you want an overview of them all, say you've got 20 odd grids down here and you can't see them all, you can just click here and it will show you an overview of each one. So that would work quite well if you did a folder for each new inductee, and then perhaps they have multiple grids in order to complete. If there's just one grid that they have to complete, then you've got the overview at the grid level here in the info. Okay, I hope that answers that one. Do come back on the question if that doesn't answer it, and ask me again. Oh, okay, I've got one for you, Kayleigh. If people use the grids day by day for the induction, how do you keep the human personal side of the induction? As in, how do you keep them engaged and feel welcome to the business by clicking element by element?
So for me, we use the method grid as a kind of a way of keeping it consistent. So we don't actually necessarily read out the information that's on the grids or on the elements. It's just a place where we can refer to. So we'll open the elements and we'll talk through it with them. And it was intended to be a place where they could refer back to it. In feedback that we've had in the induction training and the old way that we used to do it, people do enjoy the ability to be a bit autonomous with it. So they can then, if they wanted to read back over any of the information, we have sat and talked through the information with them. But if they wanted to go back to it in their own time or use it as a way of training themselves, just because we never know if people prefer to be talked to in the training or if people prefer to read or be more practical with it. So although we do use the grid as part of the induction process, it is very led by someone sitting and walking through the elements with them, as opposed to just kind of giving it to them and say, read this information.
Yeah, that's good. I guess you could easily do it either way, really, couldn't you?
Mm-hmm. And it just, like I say, it's good for consistency as well. Just if I'm I'm not in the office or not available, I can hand it on to someone who's also knowledgeable in it, and it's all set out in the same way, so everyone is getting the same level of training as well.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I've got one more question here. It's one for me. Is there a way to link the elements, as in click to the next element instead of going out and coming back? Yes, there is. Okay, so let's do it in. Okay, well, we'll do it. It should work. Depends how many of these grids I've got. So if this was, say you wanted them to start on this one and then go through to this core values one, maybe is the next step, but you can link to any of them basically. So I'd start in here and I add an element area, which is called an element link. Okay, and when I add that, you can just relabel the outside of this one. You could put it at the end possibly and say next step or something like that. And then you can have a little description here. Like go here next or something like that. And now I can link to any element in any grid I have access to. Now I've got quite a lot in here because I'm the architect. So it's Susie's, it's not Induction. It's alphabetical, it should be. Oh, let's see these. I can't find her grid. Well, I'll just pick one. So say it's this one, for instance. It doesn't have to even be in the same grid. It can be in any grid. So let's say the next stage is this project Z. If I click on that now, that's added a link to that element. So if I come out and save that, when I'm not in edit mode, it just appears like this, and that will link off and open that in a new tab here and open the element. Okay, so you can do it. You kind of have to plan it through. It's much easier when you're not an architect and don't have access to every single grid on the platform. Okay, I've got some more questions coming in. Coming into an element, yes. Another one for you, Kayleigh. What was the main difficulty you or the new staff encountered with using Method Grid, if any? Any lessons learned?
From the induction side, from the new starter side, because we do get feedback from each new starter, and one of the questions we did ask was about Method Grid. This was when we were in the testing phases, and obviously I wanted to use it as a backup for I need this to use it for my inductions. For me personally, I think it was more the general layout of it. It took me like a little while just to figure out how I wanted it to be laid out in the way that would be simple for me to add the information in. So it did take a little bit of playing around with it, but now that I've kind of got the way that I like it to be done, it is very simple to use. It's one of the definite positives of it is that it's just so easy. If you do want to change it, it's not a big effort to change information or move things into different places. So and like I say, from the new starter point of view, I've had absolutely zero complaints with it. So I'm assuming that everyone's happy and find it easy to use.
Okay, and we've got another one. So here, is it only the checklist feature which creates a progress bar? At the moment, yes. So any checklist items create these progress bars above the element here, and when you're in the folder or any of these overviews. But in the product roadmap, there's going to be a lot more kind of assigning parts of elements or elements themselves or grids themselves to people. And part of that will include more of a kind of a dashboard overview of where specific users are. So at the moment, it's just the task lists, the tasks that have a progress bar, but in the future, I think it'll be many more things. And then another one for you, Kayleigh. Mm-hmm. How much support do you receive from the Method Grid staff? Is it intuitive, or did you find you needed help along the way?
So I think one of the really good things about it is all of the different example grids that are on there. In terms of asking questions and things like that, everyone is very, responsive. So I have had a few questions. Usually I get an answer within the hour. Really, it has been very easy to use. And it was definitely one of the big draws for me. It's the templates that are available. You can kind of get inspiration on how things are laid out, which isn't always something that you get with new systems and things. So I think having templates there is useful. I definitely used the staff induction one when I was starting out to try and build my board. So it's definitely something that's been helpful for me personally.
Okay, thanks, Kayleigh. So question, okay, and I've got one in the chat here from Jane. Are we limited to label numbers and colors that you have, or can we create more? So good question. At the moment, it's fixed with the number of labels and colors, but that is also in the development roadmap. So you've got the same colors here. So you've got labels, colored labels that you can actually give the grids themselves. We also have, you're probably talking about these as well, we also have labels within the grid to label the elements within the grid, which is the same palette and the same number at the moment. But to answer your question, in the roadmap, yes, we're going to be able to define these colors for yourself, and we're going to increase the number as well. So you'll be able to do more labels. Okay, let me just check, see if we've got any more questions coming. Okay, one more. Oh, no, I've got a few more. Okay, one for both of you. If you make a addition to your induction, does it only update the main template, or will it update the individual person grid too? Well, at the moment, Kayleigh, you're using one grid, aren't you?
Yeah.
Rather than cloning it each time. So, I mean, I can do that. So if you've got one grid, then as soon as you make an update in that, it's live. At the moment, if you clone, so in my example, I went to that grid here. I sort of did an example of having a template that you would clone. So when I clone that, it's its own individual instance. So if I was then to edit something in here, it wouldn't automatically update the one that I'd cloned for Susie in here. There is kind of a good reason for that, especially in inductions. It's a kind of a snapshot of where you were at the time. Otherwise, you might add a whole new element, and then it would update on Susie's induction grid, and the poor Susie might not have never seen it because when she did it, it didn't exist. But we do have in the roadmap, what we're thinking about at the moment is a kind of a master and a slave relationship in the future, where it would be optional, where you could have, and we're going to set it probably, this is in work in progress, this would become a master, and you would say, okay, if I clone from this and then I update that, then yes, do push that update down to everything. But we feel like that needs to be an optional feature, because in a lot of cases you might not want that to happen. So it's like if you had a project methodology which has been followed, you wouldn't want to add a new stage to that and then see it go back to your historical ones, because that stage would never have been done if that project was closed, for instance. So I think it will be there quite soon, but I think it will be optional, so you can do like an either or. And we do have another one here. Okay, Kayleigh, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend Method Grid to a friend or colleague?
I would definitely say 10, and I have done.
Oh, good, thanks. Good answer. Okay, so if anyone else has any more questions, please do ask them. This is miraculously right on the 30-minute mark as well. This is unheard of. Okay, guys, well, look, if there's no more questions, I'll leave it hanging there for another minute or two, just in case anyone thinks of anything. But if there's not, thanks very much, everyone, for joining us. Thanks a lot for your time, Kayleigh. It's been really good.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
And we'll sign off. So goodbye, everyone. See ya. Bye, Kayleigh.
Bye.
Bye.